This is example 1 for the introduction to drawing files. To begin this example, we should have our example 1 file open, and then we'll select New and select 3.5 by 11 inch drawing template. Now, much like in assembly, we have a dialog open to insert our components onto our drawing file. And it is important also, much like in assembly, the drawing is simply pictures of a part or an assembly and does not contain the geometry itself. So without the drawing to go along with the picture, the drawing file will not work properly. It would be like you sitting in front of your webcam and somebody at another computer looking at you on your webcam. If you were no longer in front of your webcam, their viewer would no longer show a picture of you. It requires you to be present for the webcam to show a picture of you. Now, we're not going to insert our component with this dialog because there is an easier way to insert components into a drawing file. So I'm going to go ahead and close this dialog and then come over to the task pane and open up the View palette. From the View palette, I can select from a list of my currently open documents, and I want to select Example 1. Now that I have Example 1 selected, I can see 8 of the views of that Example 1. This is much easier than any other way of inserting views into a drawing because I can select which view I want to be the front view, even if that view is not perpendicular to the front plane. In this example, I'm going to be using my top view from my part as my front view for my drawing. So I'll select the top view and drag it over to my graphics area. I can drop that, and then I've got a projected view dialog automatically opened with the thumbtack on to keep it visible. So I can continue to drop views projected off of my first view. I simply want a top view and an isometric view. And then I'll press Escape to get out of the projected view dialog. Now let's reorientate these views so that we make best use of our drawing space. The other thing we want to look at is the different ways we can view each of these files. So I can select one of my views, and then under Display Style, I'm going to change my isometric to shaded with HLR edges. And that just seems to help a user quickly visualize what this part looks like in 3 dimensions. Also, a handy little tool as you're creating the drawing is the 3D Dynamic View. I've got a shortcut key Shift-R. I'm going to select the 3D Dynamic View, and I can actually select a view and rotate around within that view to get a feel for the features, and when I'm done, I'll simply select Exit, and the view will jump back to where it is. So now we know how to manipulate our views and change the display style of the view, but we also need to know how to add any information to the drawing that's pertinent. Now, before we do that, we need to understand the 2 aspects to a drawing file. Drawing files are made up of 2 things. One, the drawing template, that much like an assembly template and a part template does, it captures the units, font size, and things like that, the theoretical things that you don't actually see. The other aspect to a drawing file is the sheet format. And the sheet format is this outlining border that's not part of my components. It's the information captured that displays the vendor, the part name, the date it was created, the drawing by. All that information that you would generally think of as a template is actually called the sheet format. To edit that sheet format, I'll right click and say Edit Sheet Format. Once that format's open, I can zoom in, and I need to add a note to say who drew it and who checked it. So I'll right click and say Annotation Note. I find it easiest to just drop the note up off the screen. I am going to type my name, and then I'll drop another note to say who checked it. And once I'm done dropping notes, I'll press Escape to get out of the note command. Then I can just drag this note inside of my box there. You'll see also there's some text that appears to be blue in color. And this blue color means it's linked. So we've got a link to say when we created this drawing, and that's automatically generated, and also a link to display the name of the file. Again, another automatically generated portion of this drawing. Once we've got our information complete, we can right click again and say Edit Sheet, and we're back to the sheet showing our components. Now the last thing we need to do is simply add our dimensions. So I'll select D, much like in a drawing, and I can go through and add my relevant dimensions. Now each drawing standard has a different way that arrows are supposed to be displayed. And I'm not going into detail as to how that information is to be displayed. I'd more just like to show how to make use of each of the functions. So if we look at this 1/4 inch dimension, we can see that the arrows are somewhat overlapping. If I simply select the little dot inside the arrows, I can flip which direction those arrows go in. Again, I can flip those dimensions. The other thing we can do is if we grab the arrow next to the 1/4 inch dimension, we can change the leader length. Or at the point, we can flip what direction the leader goes in. So there's a little bit of information that is handy to be able to use while creating your drawings. Let's add a little fillet radius there, and if we want to add a note below that radius, we can go down to the dimension text, and underneath it I'm going to write TYP for typical, because there's 4 radiuses that are the same there. Now let's just go ahead and dimension the holes. And you'll see that I've got a bit of an error here. I've dimensioned a radius instead of a diameter. This is because that curve is broken by the slot. However, we obviously want that to be a diameter as it's a drilled hole. So if I select that dimension, and right click, I can say Display Options and say Display as Diameter. So now that radial dimension is displayed as a diameter as opposed to a radius. You can also see as you're adding your dimensions, they will snap to line up with other dimensions. Anyway, that concludes this example, and I hope it was a help.